Hello, welcome to today's Webinar Wednesday. We are so glad to have you today and are excited about our spring webinar series. My name is Kim Sterrett. I'm the Director of Parent and Family Programs, and it is my pleasure today to introduce to you the Director of Student Involvement at UA, Dr. Rosalind Moore Miller, who is going to talk to us a little bit about how to support your student if they are the uninvolved student. They haven't quite found their niche on campus and they're trying to connect. We know how important that is, and Roz will talk a little bit more about that as well. But thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. So thank you, Kim, for inviting us. I wanted to just talk a little bit about our office and kind of what we do, just to kind of help set the context of involvement at the University of Alabama, and to just talk a little bit about dispelling some myths that may be out there about how involvement works on campus and what are some of the avenues to get involved. And so our office has a dedicated staff of 4 professionals that really eat, breathe, and sleep involvement. And so we really work to help our students get connected by meeting with them one-on-one, by working with our students that can act as peer mentors to students who want to get involved. And so hopefully through kind of going over some of the information in this webinar, you'll have a better idea of ways that you can kind of direct your student or help support them in their journey at UA. And I would tell you that this is a really important journey, and so we want to make sure that that these things happen in a way that kind of helps us support the work of what our students are doing. So let me try to scroll down. All right, perfect. So just a little bit about who we are. So as I mentioned earlier, we're the Office of Student Involvement. And so one of the things that our mission as an office is to help students navigate opportunities for involvement by helping them achieve personal excellence in everything that they do, and by encouraging the open exploration with the campus and engaging in the different learning opportunities that are available to them. Through this, we hope that they will get a sense of both individual growth and development. And really, I like to stress that individual piece of the development, because it's important to understand that the journey to involvement at UA looks different for each one of our students. There's no one path to involvement. Every student that we come in contact with is going to have a different kind of involvement footprint while they're here. And so it's important to know that while there are signature things that our students get connected with, there's no one experience that kind of culminates that. We really encourage students to craft that experience based on what they hope to do with their future, what kind of their skills and aspirations might be, just kind of what their interests are. And so it's really important for us to kind of think about that as we kind of lay the framework for what we're going to talk about today. And so one of the ways that we like to really talk about involvement is just kind of helping students connect with the resources that are available in our office. And so one of the ways that we do that are, kind of connecting them with the different pieces of our office. And so I would say that our office is connected into 2 different pieces. One of those is the source board. And so one of those is the source board. And so with the source board, essentially what we do is that group kind of works to facilitate working with our student organizations to ensure that they are connecting with the different resources on campus to help them navigate both programming that they want to do, the goals that they have as an organization, and just kind of the general expectations that they have from either the national body that works with their organization or the local chapter. And so the source board does that. And those are some great leadership opportunities for our students. We employ 5 director students that work with that program and then work with the individual student orgs. The second arm of our office is our Involvement Genius team. And so what those students do is they are kind of the peer mentors to involvement. And so they're really there to help our students kind of connect to the overall opportunities that are out there on campus, and those can be within organizations, they can be leadership positions on campus, honor societies, whatever it might be. They're really just there to kind of be that peer mentor that can kind of walk a student through that process. And so students typically come in our office that might be interested in getting involved, and they can meet one-on-one with one of our involvement geniuses. And they kind of self-diagnose the student based on their interests, based on their major, based on things that they've heard about that they want to get connected to, and then they kind of help them find those resources. That group of students is really nice because oftentimes we have web resources, but oftentimes it can be really daunting for a student to go and search on the web and try to navigate the different organizations that are available to them just based off of what they see on the screen. And so this is kind of our solution to an in-touch and in-personal kind of person-to-person kind of interaction with involvement. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later through the webinar, but really just wanted to kind of highlight those two services with our office because I think those are important to kind of the overall experience. And specifically, if we're talking about the uninvolved student, I would really encourage any students that you might be interacting with or your student who might be uninvolved to really just come to the office. At this point, if they've gotten to spring semester and they're really just kind of struggling with finding their niche, it's a really good idea to let them come by the office and meet with us one-on-one, because I really think those peer mentors can kind of help guide them through that process a little bit better than maybe what they've done on their own. So I want to talk a little bit about the why. Why should you really be stressing your student to get connected? Why is it so important to stress involvement? And you can see from my screen, you know, the thing I like to tell parents is I'm like, look, we have a dilemma. And part of that dilemma is, you know, we have the brightest students. We have the best students. Our students are smart. They're active. They're resourceful. They're savvy. They're advocates for their needs. They really, they champion the spirit of excellence that we really put about on campus. And, you know, when you start to look at that and you start to compare those students against each other and maybe other students in the nation that kind of have those same attributes, how do we really set our students apart to be successful in their future goals? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because oftentimes, some parents get concerned that their students aren't involved and others kind of just want their students to focus on their books. And it's really a combination experience that we're trying to promote. And I want to talk a little bit about, why has this involvement thing become so important and why do we really need to stress and get our students connected if they haven't yet? And ultimately, part of it is they must prepare for their futures. As you can see from the slide, this is kind of a depiction of people waiting for an interview. And the reason I chose this picture to kind of illustrate what I wanted to talk about here is because currently, one of the things that if you talk to our Career Center professionals, if you talk to any of the companies that come into the University of Alabama to talk with our students, what you will find is that they are looking for students that have had experiences. And often our interviewing process, the interview process that you and I may have gone through when we got our first jobs is very different from what our students see now. In talking with our career professionals, a lot of them talk about the fact that our students are now being questioned in what we call experiential interviews. And so some of that is just the nuance of changing questions from what are questions, what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are your likes and dislikes, to things like, tell me about a time when you've had to work with a group of people and plan a program, or tell us about a time when you've had to work through a difficult situation. And so as you can see in those nuanced kind of changes to how interviews are going, our students must have real experiences that they can draw from. And so involvement is kind of the key to that. In addition, some of the skills that, employers are looking for are, oftentimes skills that they call, a lot of people will call them soft skills. I like to call them more essential skills, because they're really things that are going to be important to students really connecting to the different things that are going to be important in the job market. And so as you can see, some of the skills that we talk about are things like critical thinking, intelligence, leadership, communication skills, strategic planning, being able to organize, being a team player, being flexible. These are all things that students are going to need and that they're going to have to prepare for to be successful on the job market. And so some of you may be familiar with the term extracurricular, and you may have heard people talk about the term extracurricular in high school, and you may have heard people say, you know, anything outside of the classroom is the extracurricular experience. And so as opposed to what we call it now, the co-curricular experience, because these things are connecting with the one another versus kind of being alone or separate. And so what I mean by that is the skills and experiences that our students are learning in the classroom are also connecting with the things they're learning outside the classroom. And so there's more emphasis on that connection between those two things as opposed to those two things being seen as separate. And so it's really important that we start to kind of help our students understand that all of the experiences that they're having on the college campus really make up the involvement opportunities and the involvement kind of portfolio that they will have when they leave here. And so let's talk a little bit about, you know, them finding their place on campus. And so, you know, we want to focus on the uninvolved student. And so oftentimes with the uninvolved student, really part of the challenge is they just haven't found that thing that just kind of fits their niche currently. And so they may be struggling because there are too many options. Oftentimes we find that a lot of our students become overwhelmed because we have options. And that's the thing. It's great to have options. I love the fact that we have so many options, but I can understand that idea that a student might be overwhelmed by that. And so that's why we've built a number of resources in our office to kind of help navigate that. And so I'm not sure if you parents are aware of the number of student orgs that we have, but we have roughly 600 student orgs currently. And so as you can tell, that could really, you know, no one student has probably sat down and read the descriptions and read the names of every one of the 600 student orgs that we have. And so as you can see, that would be a challenge. It's kind of like, you know, sometimes for some students, they may feel like they're searching for that needle in the haystack. And so that's why one of the tips that I want to give you guys today is first, how they can break that down into a more manageable goal, and really how they can focus on kind of 3 top organizations that they want to focus on first, and then kind of work their way into some more things that kind of branch off of that later on. And so I want to talk a little bit about those 3 top things. So top 3 organizations to seek out during their time on campus. The first one I would suggest for a student is an organization that is major specific. So we're talking if your student is a nursing major, if your student is a business major, or your student wants to go into politics or some type of advocacy, try to help them narrow in on an organization that's specific to that major. And so the great thing about that is we do have our organizations kind of divided by majors and by colleges to kind of help students navigate that. And so they can search our system by a type of college. So if they're in engineering, they can search and it can narrow down some of the organizations based off of the college that they're in. And when they meet with us specifically, we can also drill down some of that to kind of help them find something that's very specific to what they want to do. One example, I just met with a student not too long ago, and they were a nursing student, but they are very interested in potentially in the future going to medical school. They started out in nursing thinking they just wanted to do strict nursing, and then have now decided that, you know, maybe I want to go to nursing school one day. And so they were very interested in medical missions. And so we were able to narrow down. We actually have 2 or 3 different student organizations that deal specifically with some type of medical missions process. So some of them just kind of talk about the process of medical missions. And then one of the organizations actually does medical missions work. And so we were able to connect that student with that specific organization based off their major, based off a particular interest that that student had. And so I think when you start to kind of narrow down to a top 3, it really kind of takes that daunting task of I've got to find everything that I'm interested in and get connected to it, and kind of takes it down to something a little bit more manageable. So that would be our first one that we would ask students to do. The second would be to find an organization that speaks to a hobby or passion that they have. And so, for instance, one of the organizations that a student, we have students oftentimes that come into our office, and when they came to UA, they were really passionate about the arts, or maybe they had a hobby of theater, but they didn't want to major in that, or maybe they had a hobby of science, but they weren't interested in being a science major. And so I really like the idea that we find something that a student has a hobby in, or interest or passion in, and we connect them to that, because that really helps to ground those students to who they are. A lot of our students come to college, and the first thing they want to do is completely reinvent themselves, which I think is great. You know, college is definitely about reinvention, it's about exploration, but I also think that students should seek to find something that grounds them to who they are. You know, they were a person before they came to the University of Alabama, and they will certainly be a person when they leave. Hopefully more well-rounded, hopefully kind of going back to the mission that we have, having built those individual goals and those individual kind of exploration goals. But the reality is we want to make sure that they are finding things that they have an interest in, and that they're doing those things. And some of the reasons why is parents, really one of the main reasons why we want your student involved. It keeps them connected to campus. What about stress? How many of your students have called you and they are stressed? Really having something, an outlet that they really enjoy, something that they really like, can help them kind of combat some of those stressful times and stressful moments that will come up. We don't make the assertion that your student will never be stressed while they're here. We know that they will encounter stress. And so what better way to have an outlet for stress than to join something that you're passionate about, that you have a hobby for, and really get connected to that. And so that would be the second type of organization. And the last one, it should be pretty easy to guess. If you were, if I was in person with you, I'd ask you guys to guess what the next one would be, but it should be pretty easy based on the first two that I've mentioned, which are: 1, find a major specific organization; 2, find a hobby or passion. But the third thing would be to find an organization that gets your student out of their box. And so one of the things that I often talk to students about is, again, college is about exploring, and it's about kind of that exploration of finding out new things that you didn't know about yourself. And so what better way to do that than to connect with organizations or connect with something that you've never thought about doing. So again, this is a great time for a student to kind of go out on a limb and do something totally different. And so I was asked by the Parent Programs Office to kind of talk a little bit about 2 of our programs, and to dispel a little bit of myth about Get On Board Day. Obviously, I want to talk about Get On Board Day because it is a great way for students to kind of find that out-of-the-box organization. And we do host that involvement fair at the beginning of every fall and spring semester. However, it is not the only way that our students can connect to different organizations that are available to them. A lot of what students can do is, through Get On Board Day, they get connected to the organizations in person. But another outreach that we do is through our social media. We try to promote the different organizations that are having events and programs. And so we really encourage students to follow organizations on their social media accounts. And to another way to kind of go out on a limb is to just pop up at their meetings. A lot of our organizations post their meeting times and locations on our website. If they're not on our website, or those have been updated, they will tweet about those. They'll put them on Facebook. They'll put them on their social media. And so one of the ways that we encourage students to kind of get outside of their box is to go to those organization meetings that they might have an interest in. because I will say that Get On Board Day is a great snapshot. It is certainly by no means the way to kind of learn the most about the organizations, however, because these interactions at Get On Board Day are short. They're really introductory meetings. And so as students kind of narrow down their options, we encourage them to delve a little bit deeper into knowing more about the organization by showing up to their meetings. And so using our office as a resource to find out about those events, to find out about those programs is really the best way to go. One of the things that I like to mention too is that oftentimes at the beginning of the year, our involvement geniuses will host kind of round robins where they will go with students to meetings. Part of the reason that they do this is because a lot of times students will get to spring semester and realize that they've yet to connect with an organization. At this point, they realize that they may be kind of an outlier in terms of that. And so it can be it can be stressful for a student to think about kind of trying to make that new connection with the group that may already be kind of halfway through the business of the year. And so we actually will send a student, an involvement genius will go with the student to a meeting to kind of help break that ice. And obviously it's easier for two people to walk into something new than one person. And so again, we really encourage you, if your student finds themselves kind of going into spring semester, having yet to be connected to an organization, to reach out to us, because they still have a chance. Get On Board Day is just an introduction. It certainly is not the only way that our students get connected. So if your student missed Get On Board Day, or were not able to attend, or something of that nature, we still have resources available to them, and we really encourage them to reach out to us so that we can kind of get them information. The last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about as it relates to that is another event that we host. And that event, we had to postpone due to weather, but last week, and so I would have talked a little bit more about Get On Board Day, but actually want to talk a little bit about another one of our programs, Organization Takeover. And so through Organization Takeover, our students are able to connect to organizations and their first meeting. And so that event actually is going to take place tonight and tomorrow from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the Ferguson Student Center. And essentially what happens is various organizations sign up for 1 hour meeting slots. And so we pack in meetings from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. in all of the available rooms in the Ferg, and students can go to those meetings. I really love Organization Takeover as a concept because it's a great follow-up to Get On Board Day. And it's actually a more kind of intimate kind of exploration of the organization. So instead of just focusing on, focusing on all 600 organizations, students can be very specific, and they can look at the list and they can pick the organizations that they have the most interest in, and they can spend an hour or two kind of bouncing back and forth through various rooms in the Ferguson Center, visiting those first meetings. And we thought it was really great too, because oftentimes our organizations, they are separate entities. And so if we left, it up to all the organizations, you might have an organization that has a meeting on Monday night. You might have another one that has a meeting on Thursday night. Well, through Org Takeover, because we're still in that introductory phase, they can go to all of those meetings within the span of 2 or 3 hours at the same time, at the same night. And so it's really just kind of a good way to get our students more connected to the different things that are available to them. So I wanted to kind of touch on those 3 orgs for a second, because a lot of times our parents get concerned about the number of things that their students are juggling. And I want to talk a little bit about some graduation rate numbers that we got back based on students that were involved in organizations, because I think it's really important to kind of make that correlation between number of organizations and involvement in relation to classwork. And so what we found, and these are UA specific numbers, we found that students at UA who were involved in 2 to 3 organizations were 50% more likely to graduate than students who were not involved, or who were involved in 1 or less. And so I thought that was a really novel concept, because I was like, so you mean to tell me that students that are more busy would be more likely to graduate than students who aren't? And when you first think about that, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? You're like, so if a student is juggling more outside the classroom or with their classroom experience, how does that make them more successful? And really what I would tell you about that is that, you know, going back to those soft skills that we talked about earlier, they're developing the ability to multitask. They're developing the ability to be team players. They're developing the ability to juggle more than one thing. And so at the end of the day, the thing that is most important about that is that they are invested and they are accountable to someone other than themselves and other than you as their parents. You know, those two are really strong, to be accountable to self and to be accountable to their parents. However, the strongest, and what we know of students at this age, and probably at the age they were when they left you, what we know about that is that that accountability to their peers is just as strong at this time in their life. And so when you think about that in relation to our student-led organizations and their involvement, you can kind of see the correlation there, that being accountable to their peers in a leadership role makes them more likely to graduate because they feel that they are beholden to something other than themselves, other than, you know, the expectations that they have from their family. And we really encourage you guys to kind of help us make that clear to our students, that involvement is really important. And so to end on that, I want to talk about just kind of 4 tips that you all as parents can take in talking about this opportunity to students. And again, rehashing that. 1, encourage engagement. So the first thing I want you guys to do as parents today, especially since we have an event coming up tonight and tomorrow, is to talk to your student about org takeover. So that's the first thing, encourage engagement. So I'm giving you the script right here, what you can tell them today. So you don't even have to make this one up on your own this first time. Call your student, tell them, have they heard about organization takeover? And when they say yes, I hope they say yes, then encourage them to go. If they say no, then you tell them to get their tails over to the Ferguson Center from 5 to 10 p.m. either today or tomorrow, or both days, because there will be different organizations represented on those 2 days. And when they ask you what they're going to do when they get there, you tell them you're going to get to go around to meetings for various organizations that you might have an interest in, and it'll help you kind of narrow down what you want to get involved in. Because again, I want you to really encourage them to get those 3 orgs, those 3 types of org under their portfolio, because those are going to be the things that really help ground them. And again, going back to that number of 3, as you can see from our research and from our data, 3 is that magic number. 2 to 3 organizations, the students that were most successful and that graduated the quickest were in 2 to 3 organizations. And so I think there's something to be said that students who were in 1 or less were less likely to graduate in that 4-year, 5-year time frame. So again, they need to find those top 3 and really learn to kind of navigate those. The second parent tip I want to give you is to regularly ask them about involvement. So I gave you those top 3, and we said that they should find something that speaks to their major, they should find something that they have a hobby or passion for, and then they should find something that goes outside of their box. So again, parents, what I want you to do is regularly ask them about their involvements to see if their involvements are aligning with that kind of idea of the top 3. So you can ask them things like, when they tell you about something new that they're involved in, you could say, well, that's cool. How do you think this is going to help you gain some of those soft skills that you're going to need for the workforce? Or how does this particular group that you're now involved in speak to your major? And so when you ask them those questions, you can start to kind of drill down if these are frivolous involvements that they might need to table for some future, or if these are things that are really kind of speaking to what we promote, which is for them to get connected to something related to their major and kind of those other 2. So you can kind of be a tool in that process by regularly asking them about their involvement. And part of the reason that we ask you to do that as well is because as you take interest in the things that they're interested in, they're going to matter to them more, and they're going to be more likely to engage in those activities. So that's your second tip. The third tip is help your students figure out creative ways to balance their time. Again, We want to be careful that our students don't over-engage themselves. Notice that there was no data that supported students getting and graduating faster with 5 or 8 involvements. There is a point where a student can overcommit themselves, but there's also that fear of undercommitment. And so we need to find that kind of sweet spot in the middle. And they're going to need help navigating and creating ways to balance their time as they get involved in those different things. We're not saying that it won't be difficult to juggle those different things, but there are ways to do it. And if they learn to do it, they're going to be more successful overall in their collegiate experience. And so help your students find ways to balance their time by talking to them about, again, the alignment of what they're doing with their future goals, or the alignment with what they're doing with their passions, making sure that the things that they're doing are things that they're passionate about, and that they're not just picking up extra things just for the sake of saying they have extra things. A lot of times students get really caught up in the resume building process, and the resumes are important, but being able to speak about those experiences is going to be that much more important. I have had actual students tell me that they've been in interviews with their really packed out resume, and somebody goes and searches for the most obscure thing on their resume and says, "Oh, tell me about the time you were a, underwater scuba diver." And they're like, they realize they only did it for one day and they have nothing to say about it. And so sometimes it's not as important to put those things on your resume and pad the resume as it is to have really, really solid experiences, fewer solid experiences where you actually have real depth of knowledge about what you did in those positions. So help them find creative ways to balance their time. And the last thing I would encourage you to do is just be open to their change. And I say that because, you as parents go through change. I know my parents did. They really struggled with trying to help me change, and then helping themselves change by realizing they were empty nesters and they didn't have me sitting there, and they had to find something to do with their new time. The same way that they kind of went through a change, your students will also go through a change where kind of some of those things that we've encouraged them to do, thinking outside the box, going and getting a hobby or passion, finding their hobbies and passions. When they do that, it's going to change them. And it will change them for the better if you help them and you're open to that change. And so we just want to encourage you to think about that as you start to see your students navigate that experience. And so the last thing I wanted to remind you guys about is just kind of who we are, and that your students can connect with us in person. It is even a challenge for us sometimes. We wish that we could personally drag every student that's uninvolved into our office space. Believe it or not, they come in the Ferg, they go downstairs, they eat, and sometimes they just don't come up to the third floor. If we had the capacity and ability, we would literally drag them into our office. But what we're asking you to do is kind of help us in that process. So if you are a parent of a student that has not been involved, I want you to email us immediately after this webinar to our email, which I'll show you, and let us know your student and help us get them into our office. We can help them with a quiz. We can help them with an in-person interaction with one of our involvement geniuses. And ultimately, what we're going to do is help them get involved. At this point, they have gone to their own devices and they have not been successful. So we are going to step in and kind of help them navigate that process. And so we really want you to kind of champion that cause for us. And so lastly, just wanted to put up our information again. This is our social media. Our email address is uainvolvement@ua.edu. You can email us there. And we want to hear about your students. We want to hear about their experiences. And hopefully you can also follow us on our social media and see about the different events that we have coming up. But want to thank you for engaging with us today. And if you have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out to me. But at the end of the day, we want you to know that the involvement of your student is important, and we want to really help them make that happen. So thank you again for listening, and roll tide.
Thanks so much, Roz. We appreciate your time. And so when Roz talks about the org takeover tonight and tomorrow night, those dates are tonight, Tuesday.
Yes. Today's the 23rd.
23rd.
Yes, Tuesday the 23rd.
Tuesday the 23rd. in the Ferguson Center from
5 p.m. to
5
10
p.m. to
p.m.
10 p.m. And then on Wednesday, January 24th, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. again. And so we want to make sure that they have the right dates and that they can attend both nights.
Absolutely.
Because there will be different organizations each night. And so we want them to come and get themselves a niche.
And on our social media, we have a list of the organizations that will be participating and the time slots. So they can check that out and look for any specific group that they might be interested in.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much. We look forward to having y'all back again next week when we are going to be with the Counseling Center, some presenters from the Counseling Center who are going to talk about how to support your emotionally struggling student or potentially your student who might be dealing with some mental health issues. So we are looking forward to being with you again next week. Thanks so much. Roll Tide.